if you want to grow, you absolutely need to invest money into the business.
Mm,
Without that, you're spending your time, and that is not a renewable resource.
yeah.
And if you're just relying on your time and you're staying up too late at night and you're waking up too early in the morning and you're spreading yourself thin, your business is not going to succeed.
Welcome to the Breadwinner Podcast. This is the show for sourdough microbakery owners who are building a sustainable, successful, profitable business from their home. If you are already in business or if you're dreaming of starting one, this is the place for you. I'm your host, Caroline Bauer. I own a successful in-home sourdough bakery, and I am here to share everything I've learned that works and that doesn't, plus everything that I'm researching along the way so we can build thriving businesses together. Welcome back to another episode of the Breadwinner Podcast. It's Caroline here, and I am here with Melissa. I have a guest today. I've been so excited for this episode for months. We are turning the tables a little bit. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself, but she's going to interview me, which feels really weird, but really fun. And we're just going to get a little bit of a different perspective on my business. So, introduce yourself to us.
Yes. So thank you for having me. Hi, fellow breadwinners. My name is Melissa, and I have the pleasure of being Caroline's baking assistant. I met Caroline at one of your workshops, and I learned the art of making sourdough. I fell in love with it, loved the workshop experience. And so naturally, I started following you on Instagram. You were looking for a baking assistant, and I said, sign me up. I thought it was such a great opportunity to continue to do something that I loved doing and help you and as you continue to grow your business. And then I also loved the opportunity to learn from you too. And it's just been so much fun learning from you, and I've had the opportunity to just watch your business grow so far. So you've grown a lot, not only in bread sales, but also in your online community, your coaching program. And so I thought it would be really fun today to just put you in the hot seat and ask you some questions of an end of the year wrap up. Are you ready to be in the hot seat?
I think so.
Okay, let's do it. So tell us a little bit about you. Tell us your story and a little bit more about your professional background.
Okay. I've always baked, but I've always baked just to serve the family and nourish. But my professional background is a little bit scattered. I guess the thread that kind of runs through it is serving people in one way or another. I worked in restaurants, front of house, back of house. I worked in hospitality. So I worked at a four diamond fancy dude ranch in the mountains in the middle of nowhere in Colorado for a couple of years. I ran the housekeeping department there for a couple of years. Just a lot of random things. And then once I moved into more of a corporate world, I did sales for a little while, did not love it, and then moved into customer service and kind of stayed customer service admin more or less until I moved out of corporate when I was about a year postpartum with my second. And I've just always felt really entrepreneurial. I've just
Yeah.
always seen myself building some sort of business that serves people. And one thing has led to another, and that's ultimately landed me here.
Yeah. Wow, that's neat. I love how unique your background has been, but I feel like you've been able to pull from all of those experiences and really transfer it into this business, which is really cool. So ultimately, what inspired you to start the micro bakery business?
Yeah. I think like a lot of bakers, I didn't ever think of myself as I didn't see it as becoming a business because it started as baking for the family.
Mm.
It started because I have a gluten sensitivity. We were buying so much gluten-free bread, and I got to the point where I just was tired of buying all that bread with the preservatives and the extra sugar and wanted to be able to make our own nutritional choices and choose my ingredients. And so gluten-free bread is really hard to make and nothing that I baked turned out. So that led me into sourdough, which just snowballed, as a lot of people I think experience, into a whole business. And so it wasn't like an inspiration where I was like, I see myself as a bread baker, but rather an answer to prayer. And it met the needs of our family in that season because I needed a job. And I've shared this story a little bit in the past, but our schedule is really unique, and so it was hard to find something that was going to serve our schedule,
Yeah,
and this allowed me to choose my hours and earn the income that our family needed.
that's wonderful. Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of people in this community that's what they're seeking, and that's the
Mhm,
root of why they are where they are. So I love how relatable that is and that you're
mhm.
able to share that journey and really make that happen for you and your family. Was there a moment that really clicked for you in that discovery period where you said, I can really make this into a business and I can really make this work for myself and for my family? What clicked and changed for you?
Yeah, I love that question. So there were a couple months where I was still sending in resumes and I was starting to sell bread a little bit at a time. And after a particularly successful week, I sat down with my husband and I gave him a chunk of cash and I was like, I will keep sending resumes, but I really want to see where will take me.
Love
And
that.
so we just agreed. We created a plan and put a timeline on it and said, okay, put more energy into the sourdough thing for a couple months, whatever. I don't remember what our timeline was. And I just threw myself into it. I was like, I'm going to make this work. And so I treated it like the full time job that I needed and took the steps that I needed to earn that full time income. And I think one of the light bulb moments for me that allowed me to envision it as a full time income
Mhm.
was when I saw someone else on a Facebook community share the amount of money that she was earning. And when I realized that, oh, she was earning $1,000 a week, it clicked for me like, oh, I can do that too. That's
Wow.
possible, but I maybe didn't even realize that could be possible
Mhm.
until I saw someone else do it.
Wow, that's really neat. I think there's a lot of power in transparency and sharing because you never
Mhm,
know how it'll affect someone. So that's great to hear how it affected you and
mhm,
just seeing that. And now you're doing that for other people, just being really transparent in your journey and how it works for you and your family.
mhm.
And I think that opens a lot of doors for other people to think about what could be possible.
I think so too.
Okay, you started off the micro bakery and now you've expanded, as we talked about earlier, to the podcast, to coaching one on one, and also the group inner circle.
Mhm.
And you have just really grown this business into a lot of different areas. Did you ever imagine that it would grow into this and now continue to grow?
I don't think I could have imagined quite the way that it has grown. It's been on my heart for several years to move into some sort of coaching, supporting specifically women, specifically mothers
Mm,
who want to grow a business that serves their family. And so as I was growing the micro bakery side of my business and spending time watching and interacting in some of the Facebook groups for the sourdough micro bakeries, there came a point where I was seeing so many of the same questions and I was like,
mm,
I've experienced that. I can answer that over and over and over. And so I started thinking like maybe I can start helping and serving and creating that coaching service that I've always envisioned because I have experienced so many of the things that these people are experiencing
mm,
now. And so the very first kind of step in that direction was to start creating what I saw as a coaching program, which opened my eyes to the fact that there is no podcast in this space. And so that became the next first step was there is no podcast. Someone needs to make it. Why not me? And it has just grown in ways that I'd never quite envisioned. And it's been really cool.
that's awesome. I love that you saw an opportunity, ran with it, and it is so helpful. Yeah, I'm a super fan of your podcast because it has so many helpful tools and resources, and it really brings things down to the basics too, because it can be overwhelming when you're jumping into something new. How do I do this? And if
Mhm.
this space didn't have that, it's so needed. So thank you for having that resource for us. And I love that's allowed you to just grow your coaching opportunity in a different way versus
Mhm.
one-on-one coaching only. You've been able to expand that to people that don't have the opportunity to do one-on-one coaching.
Mhm.
What would you say is a turning point that allowed you to make this business just more sustainable?
I would say a turning point was building the business strategically and adding the right equipment
Mm,
to just allow my efforts to be more efficient. So that looked like a fridge, a dedicated dough fridge at first, and then a larger mixer, and then a double oven. And those all kind of happened around the same sort of time. But I realized as the business was growing that if I wanted to keep growing, my systems and my equipment
Mm,
needed to grow with me because otherwise I was just going to be battling with bottlenecks and frustrated and ultimately burnout. And short answer, turning point was taking it very seriously
mm,
and realizing that I had to be efficient and super intentional to grow with repeatable and scalable processes. And
yeah.
then as it grew and it continued to experience growing pains, one of the next turning points was hiring you
Mm,
and bringing on some help because time is our greatest resource. And that has been my biggest limitation. And so just one thing after another, and more growing pains will come.
mm.
And whatever that looks like next, another fridge in the next year and a bread oven, and just continue to make those choices to grow in smart, effective ways so that I can continue to serve while preserving my energy.
Yeah. I think too, when you start something new, it can be challenging to identify those areas where you do need help or you
Mhm.
do need to buy a more expensive piece of equipment or whatever it may be, and just letting go and fully jumping into that. What advice would you give to people that are struggling with jumping to that next phase and really committing to
Mhm.
scaling?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a couple of things that come to mind. First is just to consider the cost of your time because a lot of times we don't consider that because there's no actual exchange of money.
Mhm.
But if you are spending 2 hours mixing your dough in bins and your hands on that whole time, you're switching from one bin to the next with your hands stuck in there and covered in
Mhm.
flour and you can't pick up your babies. And whether that's your bottleneck or it's something else, but you're just spending a disproportionate amount of time in a certain process. Maybe you're printing your labels on your home printer and cutting them out with scissors,
Mm,
where you could spend 2 minutes printing them on a thermal printer instead.
mm,
Consider those bottlenecks, those areas where you're spending just too much time on a task, and understand that the investment is going to sting.
mm.
It always does hurt.
Always
We
just a
talked
little
about
bit,
this
yeah.
last week, but sometimes that is so necessary. If you want to grow, you absolutely need to invest money into the business.
Mm,
Without that, you're spending your time, and that is not a renewable resource.
yeah,
And if you're just relying on your time and you're staying up too late at night and you're waking up too early in the morning and you're spreading yourself thin, your business is not going to succeed.
yeah, that's a really good advice. That's a good takeaway. Do you set annual business goals? How do you make them realistic and really make them in a way to where you can stick to them?
I set goals. I don't set a ton of like super concrete numeric goals because to a certain point we cannot control how much income we're going to make. But what we can control is our output and
Mm,
what we're putting into the business. So I set a lot of intentions and a lot of just plans. So a lot of times I'll start with a word and let that word be a theme of the year and guide the choices and the ways that I choose to use my energy. And then I do set goals. So I love goals. I get a huge dopamine hit from setting goals, and I could sit down and create goals and visions for hours. But then the next step is actually executing on them. And so creating that kind of balance between creating the goals and executing is the challenge that I'm continually working through. But I found that setting not just goals, but priorities, I would
mm,
say that's where I have found the most success. So, top three priorities for a week or top three priorities for a month. And then what do I need to do to accomplish those has been kind of the most effective strategy that I've found for
yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah, that's good. I think it was important that you said that you do it in a way that feels right to you. There's not one linear way to do
Mm-hmm.
goal setting. However, you are going to keep them and sustain them. That's what works. And so I love that you point that out of I do it in a way that feels right to me. And also just breaking it down into little chunks. That's great that you point that out because it's so easy to be like, what are the goals for the entire year or the next 5 years? That classic question, what do you want to do in the next 5 years or whatever that is? And so I love that you break it down into little chunks. So you have some larger goals, but you break it down in a way that is realistic and makes sense for you. That's a really great takeaway. So, what is one of the most important lessons that you've learned since starting your business?
I would say not to underestimate myself, not to put
Mm,
limits on my own ability or my own potential for impact, because I think that
yeah,
is where I get in my own way and where I have not seen success in the past
yeah.
is just not trusting that I had it in me.
Mm,
And so that's a continual learning experience that I have not arrived.
yeah,
But this has been a year of seeing that if I just keep taking action and don't overthink it
yeah,
and use tools strategically, even ChatGPT or hiring a coach for accountability, but doing things in faith and knowing that my strength does not come from me, but knowing that if I am continuing to move forward and take one step after the next, then really I am my own biggest limit. So I
yeah,
think that's what I've been learning over
yeah.
this experience of the past year.
Yeah, that's so good. I think that it's not a secret that, especially as women, we sometimes allow those intrusive thoughts to take over
Mhm.
and we don't allow our full potential to come out. We get so stuck in being afraid to make mistakes that we don't just try. And so, loving ourselves, knowing where our strength comes from, and knowing that we can do big things is such a big part of it. So thank you for sharing that because I think that's a really good reminder to really work against those intrusive thoughts that sometimes take over.
Mhm.
And if you could, this kind of, you might have answered part of your own question, but if you could give new baker Caroline one piece of advice, what would that be?
I'll share that on the baking side and kind of the other, like the less concrete side.
Yeah.
I think number one piece of advice to all new bakers, to new baker Caroline, and then if you're new and listening, is to get really clear on how to prepare your dough in bulk before you start selling. There is this learning curve that I think universally we generally all experience where we commit ourselves to selling 6 or 8 loaves and we mix it up and we realize, oh my goodness, this dough is behaving a lot differently than my batch of 2 loaves.
I've been there.
Yeah, we all
That.
have, and they come out super flat, and then we have promised these loaves to people, and they're not beautiful. They're really overproofed or underproofed, but usually it's over with a bulk dough. So my advice would be practice large batches of dough and plan to gift them to people if they turn out nicely, but make sure that you can consistently and reliably produce a batch of 6 or 8 or 10 loaves
Mm,
before you promise to sell them. That just saves so much heartache and frustration and is really crucial if you're going to build a business based on a product that is reliable and consistent
yeah,
and quality.
that's good. And then how about on the
And on
other
the other
side? Yeah.
side, so to new baker Caroline, who is figuring out her bulk dough, but also growing in confidence, I would say just show up authentically. And once again, don't limit yourself.
Mm,
Choose to say yes to the opportunities that seem a little scary or maybe too big for where your business is right now. Just don't don't feel like you're too small to take those steps. If an opportunity comes toward you, just fake it till you make it
yeah.
and do the things that scare you.
Love that. Love that so much. You used to own a slow fashion business, and that really took into account sustainability.
Mhm.
And so, what would you say are the skills that have transferred over from that? And does sustainability still play a role in your micro bakery
Mm,
business?
I love that question. Yes, so I had a business for about 3 years right before this one, where I served women, particularly postpartum women, through clothing, secondhand clothing, because I really do have a heart for sustainability and for choosing your purchases and your products and just being very mindful with what you bring into your home. So obviously that translates into the ingredients that I choose very mindfully. I choose my flour carefully and thoughtfully. But the way that that business has translated is a lot. I learned so much in just business ownership through that experience, through marketing and admin and organization and systems and processes that have really helped contribute to the success of this business. Then specifically sustainability, it looks different in the context of a bakery because there are things that just we there is going to be waste. There's going to be I cringe every time I throw away packaging because with my previous business, I put so much thought into everything being recyclable and reusable as much as possible. And so I do still consider that a lot and I choose the recyclable packaging when I can, and I choose to store things in reusable containers when possible. It just looks a little bit different in this context. And so it's been kind of this journey, and it's a continuing journey of making choices that feel aligned to my values of sustainability, but also don't completely sacrifice profitability and efficiency in the business. And it's a little bit of an answer that I can't say I have like, fully fleshed out yet for the bakery business. If I if I lived in a state that did not require packaging all of my loaves, then I would probably at markets have an open display and allow people to bring their own bags. I would love to offer something like that. That's not an option here. So,
Yeah,
and if that's another part of it is that our state laws require packaging and labeling. And so to stay compliant, I just have to do that. So I choose paper packaging that's as sustainable as it can be
sure.
and just making all the choices as carefully as I can.
Yeah, that's neat that because it is a completely different business. And so
Mhm.
that's really great that you've been able to evaluate what can I do in a way that makes sense for this particular business. And I
Mhm.
can say just personally from working with you, I see how you've really just nailed down your processes to where you do have as little waste as possible. And it's actually helped me be mindful too as I go into my business or even just in my daily life. I've seen how you are practicing sustainability practices with your family.
Mhm.
So, how cool is it that you've been able to take that from your previous business and really work that in? I know it's just a part of who you are as a person, but it's been really neat to see you utilize that in your business. What advice, just jumping into a little bit more about marketing and the community, what advice would you give to business owners on setting themselves apart from all of the other businesses and having their own niche that sets them apart?
That's such a good question because there are new sourdough businesses popping up constantly all around
Yeah.
us. And it can be really easy to start comparing
Mhm.
and start thinking that you need to do X, Y, and Z because the baker the next town over is doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But the key is, like you just said, differentiating yourself and understanding your niche. And so that really comes down to evaluating your values. So for me, one of those is sustainability, authenticity. I have woven my story and just my personal values into my brand. And people will come into my booth at the market and say, I can feel that this was created with so much love. And I don't
Mhm.
have to say that. So that's very intangible. But if you are to sit down with a piece of paper and just brain dump everything that is really intrinsically important to you, to your household, to your values, what do you prioritize in your life? But then also consider your family story
Mm.
and consider what led you to start selling sourdough. Your story is going to be unique to you. And the one thing that no one can completely copy. And so pull threads from that story and tell that in a way that people will resonate. So maybe you are similar to me and you have a gluten sensitivity and you couldn't eat regular bread and so you started selling sourdough and you choose your organic ingredients or maybe you give each bread a fun name or something that just makes you unique and relatable to your customers because people don't just buy from a brand. They want to buy from a person and they want to connect with the person who is creating the product. And so the more that you can present yourself as a relatable person and just be authentic, be professional. I always encourage people to put forward a professional image, but you can also be relatable and
Yeah,
authentic and transparent in a way that comes out with integrity. But to bring it full circle, I would say sit down with a pen and paper, think about what makes you super unique, and think about how you can tell that story through your messaging.
that's great. Just be uniquely you, essentially.
Yeah.
Have there been specific marketing strategies that have been the most effective for you?
For me, it's been local Facebook groups and word of mouth and local farmers market.
Mm,
So my business took off with a couple of posts in a local Facebook group. And I have consistently shown up in that Facebook group since I started. Sometimes I only post in there once a month or so, but I still keep posting in there, letting people know that I am still the baker in the community. But so many of those people have come over and shop with me at the market. I do consistently the same farmers market every second and fourth Saturday. So I'm always there and people know where to find me. And then I get them on my text list. So they get a text every week when my menu opens and they can pick up from my porch. So I think the thread through all of that is consistency.
mm.
Consistency, showing up the same way and showing up on the same day and showing up just offering a product that people know and can expect is going to be the same week after week, but not being scattered. So I'm not posting in one group one week and another group the next week and confusing people or showing up differently in one spot versus another, or popping up at a market across the city and then another one in a different town.
Mm.
I'm just showing up very predictably. And I think that has really contributed a lot to my growth.
That's good. So being consistent and really, I think what I've noticed from you as well is that you really get to know who your customer base is and understand what they want or what they need or what's the best way that they communicate. And
Mhm.
you've really utilized that in your strategy. Would you agree that every community is going to be different? And so it's important to really get to know your community
Mhm.
when you are choosing the way that you're going to communicate to them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. I do. I even send like surveys every few months to my customers and ask them what are their priorities and what products do they love on my menu and what do they want to see more of, and just touch base. And so if I do have a question and want to know, do they want emails or do they want texts? I'm going to send out a survey or ask them about that and make sure that I am serving them in the most effective way.
That's great. So you really take your customer feedback and you incorporate it into the
Mhm.
business and how you grow it.
Yeah.
That's really great. I think that's so important versus you telling them, here's how I do it, take it or leave it. You
Right.
really take the feedback and utilize it to serve them best because ultimately that's what you're wanting to do is serve your
Mhm.
community, bring them a product that they're going to love.
Yeah. And there is a little bit of the take it or leave it because there
Sure.
is a point where you have to draw some boundaries too.
Sure.
And so people who are giving me special requests all the time, I am going to have to draw that line of, no, I just don't have time to offer bagels in this season. I would
Yeah.
love to. I will put that on the radar, but I cannot make a special batch of bagels for you because I just don't have time.
Yeah.
So here's my menu, here's what's available now. And I'm not gonna say take it or leave it, but that is that's kind of the heart of it, is that I'm serving them in a way that serves the majority really well and communicating to the people who want something else with integrity and with
Yeah.
kindness and allowing them to feel heard and validated and
Sure.
not just brushed off or ignored. But also, I'm not gonna bend over backward to offer something that just doesn't fit in with what I can offer.
Yeah, no, that's really great to distinguish that and point that out
Mhm,
because ultimately that's going to allow you to produce a better product for your customers
mhm.
and for you to have your best life and for your
Right.
family and have that balance. So, other than going to the local farmers market and doing some of those surveys from your customers, how else do
Mhm.
you engage your community?
Yeah, that's a good question. On the kind of like digital social side, I share and I try to show up in some context on social media at least weekly, whether that's a Facebook story of just here's what I'm working on this week, or a poll, or a chance for them to vote on a product that I might put on the menu, or a post about my upcoming market menu. or I post in a local Facebook group. In addition to that, on the social media side where I'm showing up to engage with my community, I love to, when an opportunity comes up, to sponsor a local event. Or like
Mhm.
on Saturday, the local Christian school had a daddy-daughter dance. And so I donated a tray of scones. And I don't do that with the intention really of getting my business name out there. If something comes from it, that's wonderful. But honestly, I just love connecting with the community and being a part of it. And it's a way for me as an introvert to serve the community, not with the motivation of having sales come out of it, but just really to serve the people who live around me.
That's great. What a dream is it to be able to build a business and then have the opportunity to serve through it too.
Mhm.
And I think that's a whole nother area that just you may not even see all the possibilities in that of like, how can I, through a loaf of bread, eventually give back to the community?
Mhm.
And you've done that. How cool is that?
It's
What
such
a
a
dream.
dream. It really is.
And just getting into, we were talking a little bit about the work-life balance. So as we jump into that,
Mhm.
I think that the micro bakery business is unique in the sense that you're working at home, your shop is at home,
Mm.
and you have a family and kids that are sometimes on break for Christmas or Thanksgiving. So, how do you balance this business with your personal life as well and make it sustainable in that way?
Yeah. This is another thing that I think takes so much trial and error, and it's different for everyone. And I fully recognize my kids are a little older. They are 6 and 8, and they go to school. Most of the time, it's 5 days a week. And so I do have that time during the day where I get the majority of my work done while they're at school. And so not everyone has that. Many of us have toddlers at home. And so the energy that you have to put into your business is totally different in that season than what I
Yeah.
have to put into my business. This is a little tangent, but so important to consider the context when you're looking on social media and you're seeing these people who are selling 100 loaves of bread a week, but you have toddlers hanging on your legs.
Mhm.
You might not be in a season where you can sell 100 loaves of bread a week, and you might need to choose. So that's a total tangent on your question. I'll come back. But I think it's really important to say,
Absolutely.
hear the context and hear and consider what you don't see in other people's life and rhythm and the capacity that they may or may not have compared to
Yeah.
what you may or may not have. But for my family, I do really try to get most of my work done during the week when the kids are at home. A lot of times, like on dough day, the kids will get home, I'll pick them up, and I'll still have to shape some loaves. And so I'll be in here in the bakery shaping the loaves. And a lot of times they'll come and sit here next to me and they'll tell me about their day. And maybe they'll do some homework or read a book or draw a picture. And it's been a little bit of a thing that I've had to wrestle with of like, I am still working and I would love to be down on the floor with them drawing that picture, but they are still being filled and they love this time with me in the bakery.
Yeah.
They really do take so much pride in kind of feeling some ownership and feeling like they're connected. And that as moms, we tend to wrestle with that mom guilt so much of I need to be 100% hands-on with my children every moment that they are home. But honestly, we can nourish them emotionally, spiritually, physically, even if we're not directly hands-on. However, when I am not working and when I am with them, I try so mindfully, and this is not something I'm perfect at, but to put it down my phone and just look them in the eyes and be a part of their moments
Yeah.
and just let those moments be super, super valuable and intentional from me. And so it is a just an ebb and flow where and there are weeks where I have to work a lot harder and spend a lot more time in here in the bakery
Mhm.
and other weeks where I can close everything down and just be a lot more hands-on with them. There is no true balance. You're never going to have like a scale where it's everything's equally completely balanced on each side, but just being super intentional and same with my husband. So a lot of times he'll get off shift. He's a firefighter, so then he'll come home and we'll just sit for an hour and chat and catch up. And then I come and do my work and he goes and does his thing. But just making those moments count, not feeling guilty so much about the lack of moments or like measuring the amount of time that I'm spending with them, but just letting it be super intentional and thoughtful and making the most of those moments.
Yeah, that's good. Intentionality, I think, is so important. And you've also talked in previous episodes about how you time block and how
Mhm.
you reverse engineer your schedule to make sure that it works with your family life. And then also porch pickups or market days.
Mhm.
Did you want to talk a little bit more about that too and how that
Yeah.
adds to the balance in your personal versus business life?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
So that's a way that like there's a whole household of things that need to happen outside of the bakery space. I do love using time blocking, and so I will just like drop tasks into our spaces. And on the days where I'm not in the bakery and I need to do things like the laundry and the meal prep and all the household tasks, the most effective way that I've found to do that and to make sure that everything happens is to just drop it into hourly time blocks on on a calendar. And I do have one that I've created that's kind of like a baker schedule. It starts at 4 a.m. and it's free. I'll link it down in the show notes if you want some of them with hourly time blocks. But I brain dump all the tasks and then just drop it into those time frames. And that helps. And we utilize that as a family too. And so a lot of times my husband is super supportive and he's better than me at making sure that all the household tasks get done. And so a lot of times on like a Saturday or Sunday, we'll sit down as a family and create our schedule for the day and write down all the tasks and write down the time blocks so the kids know what to expect and they take ownership and they have their responsibilities and we all just are on the same page and we know we're doing chores from 10 to 12, but then we are doing board games and family time from 12 to 4 and then meal prepping or whatever it looks like. But that has been really effective in helping make sure that all the things get done and fewer things slip through the cracks. I'm not perfect at it, but that helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I love that you incorporate your family into the overall schedule so that they know what to expect. And there's a lot more clarity in what your week is going to look like. And of course, with the understanding that's going to be fluid, as you said, there's not necessarily set balance at all times, but
Mhm.
that allows you to be fluid and ready for anything that might come your way for that week.
Yeah.
That's great. When one thing that I love about this new bread making era, I feel like there's been a resurgence. COVID hit,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of people started making their own bread again, which is really cool to see. I would say I'm one of those people that kind of got interested in all of those again because life slowed down for a little bit.
Mhm.
And this resurgence has been so cool. Do you think that it's a trend, this whole bread making thing, or do you think that it's here to stay moving forward? And are there any other trends that in the microwave bakery world that you're keeping an eye on as well?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good question. I do think when life slowed down in 2020, while it has sped back up now, we know what that felt like.
Mm,
And I think a lot of the people who are still making sourdough bread tend to fall into the category of people who are more making family, household, food choices really intentionally and mindfully. And
mhm,
so I think we are hanging on to that slowness as much as we can. And so while the social media saturation of sourdough influencers, maybe that'll taper off. I don't
mhm,
know. It feels like it's only gaining momentum right now. Ultimately, I don't think people wanting good homemade bread is going to stop. I think
mhm,
the micro bakers in the communities who build their businesses really well are going to establish themselves in a way that the community values them and keeps coming back. And I don't think these communities are going to be like, okay, I'm done with good bread. I'm ready to go back to grocery store bread. I just don't see that happening. So, who knows exactly what the landscape will look like as far as like this crazy social media side of the sourdough influencers. I think it's fascinating how it just keeps evolving.
mhm,
And we're seeing a lot more of the business side now. So, when I started this in July of this year, so just 5 months ago, there were not a lot of voices talking about building a business. I was
mhm.
one of the very first people to start talking about it. And now we are seeing a lot of creators putting out resources for the
Mhm.
people who want to build a business. And that is probably the biggest shift that we're starting to see right now.
Yeah.
And it's so needed and so important. And so I love that we're getting more of those resources and it's less of having to dig through the Facebook threads in a couple of groups on Facebook. So I'll be watching that and seeing how that kind of takes place and hope to continue to be a voice that kind of helps serve and unite the community around the people who are building those businesses that are here to last.
Yeah, that's good. That's encouraging too, because it can be easy for someone looking to get into this business to think maybe it's just a trend, maybe this isn't
Mhm.
sustainable. But you're right. I know that for our family, once we've had good quality bread with minimal ingredients and we
Mhm.
recognize the way that we feel and how it tastes,
Mhm.
we don't want to go back to the store bought. So I think you're totally right in that. And I think it's great that people are recognizing that they can also grow this into something more than that
Mhm.
too. Do you have, just talking about the future now, do you have any future growth plans that you want to share with us?
I'm such a dreamer. I am a big picture thinker. I have so many ideas and I do have some plans for the coming year. I'll be reopening the Breadwinner Inner Circle for enrollment in January and we'll kick back off in February for the next group of people. So super excited for that. I am working on something really big that is going to bring the community together in a really cool way in the first half of 2025. And so I'll be sharing more information with about that in the coming couple of months. Super excited for what that's going to look like and the way that it'll help us all grow our businesses together. And then there's who knows what else will come for growth. I am on my bakery side and this podcast side. I think we are just poised at the edge of some really exciting things. I think 2025 is going to be a big year for all of us, really.
That's so exciting. I cannot wait to hear what or some of the things you have planned. And I love that I get to be on this side of things and see
Mhm.
some of them come to fruition. That's so much fun. So I'm excited for you to eventually share all of that with
Yeah.
everyone. So I was thinking that it would also be fun to just do like a quick rapid fire so we can get to know you even better. Be Caroline. What are some of your favorite items to bake?
I love I love baking cookies. I love baking pies.
Mm.
Not I don't do those to sell. I do them for family, but they feel um my mom taught me how to make pie crust when I was young. And so I just feel really connected to her. We lost her in 2022, and that just feels like a really sweet way to honor her memory. And I always tell my kids about how she taught me to bake pies and I use the same bowl to mix up the pie crust. So I don't do that super often, but when I do, it just feels like a really sweet way to
Love that.
connect with her. So that's probably one of my favorite things to bake.
That's awesome. I
Mhm.
actually didn't know that, the
Really?
pie thing, so I love
Yeah.
that. That's so
We
neat.
always did a family pie contest every year for Thanksgiving. I have
Mhm.
3 brothers, and so all 4 of us would bake a pie, and
Wow.
my grandpa was the judge, but he only liked fruit pies. So whoever baked the fruit pie was all automatically gonna win every year. It was very skewed, but it was still fun.
So did you choose to bake fruit pies or would you
Usually, I
change
ended
it
up
up?
with, like, pecan or pumpkin,
Yeah.
but sometimes I did the fruit one.
Classics though. Okay, so what are your favorites to eat?
This is such a hard question. People ask me this at the market every week, and I'm like, I have a bread for every mood. I can't answer. But ultimately, I just love plain classic sourdough bread. I make mine with 10% spelt, and it just feels so nourishing. I love to pile it high with avocado and everything bagel seasoning and pickled onions and a fried egg and just the nourishing bread with all the nourishing ingredients just feels like this culmination of so much goodness.
I've seen some of the sandwiches that you and your husband make, and they are legitimate sandwiches. They look so good. So definitely a good go-to for
Mhm.
sure. What is your favorite hobby outside of work when you're not baking?
I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of hobbies outside of work, but that's something that I am trying to build. Sometimes I'll just sit down with a coloring book
That's
and
awesome.
just a cup of tea and a coloring book and just be still or slow, for 30 minutes or an hour. I love hiking. We don't do it a whole lot here in South Texas, but getting outside in nature and just again being slow. I
Yeah.
tend to be just a slower person, and those moments where I can just be really intentional and mindful are my favorites.
Yeah. How great is it that there's adult coloring books now? Yes.
Mhm.
But also, I feel like bread making, we've talked about this, is so therapeutic
Mhm.
and tactile, and you get to work with your hands. And so it's like, who needs, I mean, that is our hobby.
Honestly, yes, that is still so a lot of times on, like, a Sunday or Monday, those are the days where I choose to just mix up 1 loaf for the family, or I try a new recipe, and it's still super life-giving. Even though
Mhm.
this is my full-time job now, I think taking that moment to sit with the process and stay connected and hold on to the joy of it and not get lost in the job of it, it still does feel like my hobby that I love.
Yeah, that's so good.
Mhm.
I love that. Do you have a favorite motivational quote?
I don't tend to be a big, like, motivational quote person, when everything feels a little bit crazy, but I know that it's for purpose, I kind of repeat to myself, "It's all coming together and heading in the right direction." There's a more eloquent way that I normally say it, but I can't think of it. But basically, like, it's all happening for a purpose and for good, and I don't tend to be a big motivational quote person,
Yeah,
but that does just help me stay grounded and know that while there's a lot of moving parts sometimes, it's all headed in the right direction for good purpose.
that's good. That's a good inner dialogue and mantra to
Mhm.
just pump yourself up, keep yourself grounded.
Mhm.
That's good. Do you have, we were just talking about there's all of these sourdough influencers that are wonderful and provide a lot of different resources and just fun content to watch too. Do you have any
Mhm.
favorite sourdough Instagram accounts that you like to follow?
Oh, I love following, like, European bakeries, like
Mm,
Quelan in France.
yes.
Just seeing the real deal. I follow just some German bakeries too, and all their captions are in German, and so I don't know what they're saying, but I can see them mixing up this like genuine, real deal rye bread or just like that gorgeous dough. And I love seeing that. I There are so many people who just are doing business and showing up in the community. And I could sit here for ages and call out all of these amazing people because we have an incredible community. But I tend to get so much inspiration by those who are really enriching the community and then also just watching beautiful bakeries around the world.
That's awesome. I need to follow a few more international accounts. I love that
Mhm.
because I think when you see bread making in Europe, it's very special and it shows that it can be so different. It doesn't have to look one way, doesn't have to
Mhm.
be perfect. The art of bread making is still an art regardless, and it could be abstract, whatever you make it. So I love that. Well, that concludes all of my questions.
Gosh.
Caroline, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to put you in the hot seat and ask you these questions. And thank you for your transparency. So, this has been so much fun. And I think that just on behalf of me and all of the listeners, I want to thank you so much for the dedication that you put into this community, the dedication that you put into every episode, and your heart to just help us learn and grow our personal businesses. So,
Mhm.
thank you so much for the time that you've taken to do that for us.
Well, thank you. It's an honor and a literal dream come true. This was so fun.
Yes, thank you for
Yes.
having me. This was an honor.
Yeah, it's so fun. Man, that was just so life-giving. As always, friends, I would love if you take a minute to rate and review the show so other people can find it and grow their businesses together. If you screenshot wherever you're listening from, whether it's YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and tag me, Caroline Bauer underscore sourdough, and we can all connect and grow together. And then I will be back very soon with another episode. We are just about to conclude the end of the year, which is wild. And very soon, 2 episodes from now, I think, is going to be episode number 50.
Wow.
That's insane.
Wow.
So stick around. There's so much good things coming. But until then, happy baking.